Now, you probably associate high protein diets with bodybuilders, and people that are dieting and exercising a lot typically need a little bit more protein also. But did you ever stop to think and ask, how much protein does your nan need? Did you know that for older age groups, a high protein diet might just be the key to long-term health and happiness? What the research says, top tips and strategies all coming up in today's video. Hi guys, and welcome to today's video. Now, by older age groups, I'm primarily talking about people from the age of 60 onwards. But actually, as well as that, a lot of these concepts are going to apply to people from the age of 50 and onwards, and even from the age of 30 and onwards. It's from this early age of 30 that we start to see this kind of diminishing response to A, a training stimulus, and B, the stimulus from the protein that we ingest from the diet. Why primarily do we care about protein intakes in the elderly? And well, what we're actually trying to avoid here, or what we're having in mind, is a syndrome known as sarcopenia, which is characterized by a progressive and generalized kind of loss in strength and muscle mass as we age. And why is a loss of strength and muscle mass in the elderly a particular issue? Well, this results in a higher risk of falls and hip fractures, and just a general reduced quality of life, with a reduction in mobility and a somewhat increase in mortality rates. As we can see from the table, this is from Martin McDonald at MNU, muscle starts to decline by around 1% per year from its peak in untrained people. So you can see in both men and women who don't exercise, from the age of 30, muscle mass starts to reduce kind of year on year. And by elderly age, so from 60 years onwards, it's a steep drop, especially in postmenopausal women. Now, some of the reasons for this reduction in muscle mass as we age are likely down to, as we age, a reduction in our levels of physical activity. So essentially, as we age, we just kind of move a bit less. We tend to exercise a bit less. And even from the age of 30 and onwards, we start to see the effects of what's known as kind of anabolic resistance, which in simple terms mean that the training that we do and the protein that we ingest have a somewhat diminished effect on A, maintaining muscle, or B, building new muscle if that's the aim. And it's a bit of a vicious circle. As we age, we move less, we have less physical activity, and then the activity that we do has less of a stimulating effect on maintaining muscle because of the anabolic resistance. And as we age again, our appetites for protein go down a little bit. So we find it hard to eat protein, and then the protein we do eat has less of effect because we probably need more of it. So again, a bit of a vicious circle, which all kind of results to a gradual loss in strength and muscle mass, and then sarcopenia. And then, of course, that increased risk of falls and hip fractures, which then has a knock-on effect to, increasing, mortality rates. Of course, the good news is there are a few things that we can do to kind of stave off sarcopenia or, prevent it from happening. And, if you have a loved one, nan and granddad, or even, parents who are not performing, regular physical activity levels, putting in, good nutrition, we can help out on both fronts there. But as it relates to some physical activity levels, now, again, they're going to be varying levels of activity that someone and love might be able to do. Ideally, we'd like to have them doing some form of resistance training, to maintain muscle, to build some muscle and, ligaments and tendons and for bone health. But something as little as just doing, daily step count, increasing that a few thousand a day can have some really big benefits. Encouraging this, before we get elderly is, the best thing to do, so as people start to get more elderly, less mobile, it's going to be harder to introduce physical activity. So if your mum and dad are getting on, or your nan and granddad are getting on and they're not doing anything, it's going to be harder the longer you leave it. So encouraging some good levels of physical activity, whether that be something in the gym, whether that be swimming, cycling, or just as simple as walking, are going to have some really, really big beneficial effects. And then nutritionally, protein can be a big player also to go on side of the physical activity. And of course, we know that protein plays a big role in helping to maintain and build lean muscle mass. And around about 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight per day is a good amount to hit for someone who is performing regular training exercise. And Batch, who's here in the corner, knows all about training activity and exercise. RDA for protein is set at 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight per day. Which for, let's say, a 70 kilogram person in their 60s is likely going to be a relatively low amount of protein to maintain muscle mass. But as I mentioned earlier, due to this kind of anabolic resistance in older people to protein and to training, the protein needs are going to increase if we want to help them maintain the muscle mass they have. So a likely good start point is going to be around about that 1.6 grams per kilogram that we see in young, healthy, trained individuals as a start point. Potentially increasing it up to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day has been shown to maybe be a little bit more effective. This review article from Baum et al. 2016 kind of summarizes it nicely for us. Okay, Baum 2016. Now, there have been many research papers stating protein needs for elderly populations. But as a rule of thumb, somewhere between 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day is likely the best range to be hitting. And this is to maintain muscle mass of that person and strength. Now, for that 70 kilogram person, that would ideally be a target somewhere around 84 to 140 grams of protein per day. And now you would ideally spread those out across the course of the day, so between 3, 4, 5 meals throughout the day. But also many researchers suggest that more towards the 2 grams per kilogram side is better, or equivalent of around 35 grams of protein per meal. Now, the kind of reason for increasing the protein in the meals for elderly people is kind of the same reason you would increase the protein needs for someone who's dieting or trying to build muscle, is that the extra protein is going to have extra leucine content, and the extra leucine content in the protein is going to be what's going to stimulate or help to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And the aim here is not necessarily to build muscle in your nan and granddad, because they're probably not that interested in building muscle, but the aim definitely should be to maintain what they have. And we know that the normal intakes are likely not to be optimally effective at maintaining muscle, keeping them in a positive nitrogen balance, keeping in the positive protein balance. But the extra protein gives us extra leucine. The extra leucine helps to stimulate protein synthesis a bit more in this population. The issue here then is, how do you actually get nan or granddad or mum and dad to actually eat or consume the extra protein in the diet? This can be a bit of a challenge because people of an older age, typically, appetites aren't super high. And as we know from weight loss studies, high protein diets are very filling. So it can be hard for people to get the protein in, especially in the older ages. This is where, finding ways to add in protein through the day is going to be something we need to think about. So adding, things like protein powders into, fruit smoothies can be nice. A sweet smoothie where it tastes nice, it's easy to drink, and it adds in, maybe some extra calories and some extra protein. Or things like, sweet fruit yogurts, protein yogurts, that again, easy to consume. And then all you need to do is, encourage, protein with every meal, ideally. And then looking at over the course of the day, somewhere between that 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram body weight of protein. Of course, adding on some form of physical activity as well, whether that be something on the lighter end, just walking, just steps, non-exercise activity, or somewhere a bit higher up, maybe some resistance training in a gym or something like that to help, again, add in the stimulus of the training alongside the extra protein. So hopefully there's a few tips and strategies that you can implement there. But that's all for now. So from me, for now, that's all, and I'll see you next video.